Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be rebuilding this board. Well, it's not really rebuilding, like I'm just reattaching the heatsinks to this. This is a Gigabyte 990FXA-UD5. You might be like, BuildZoid, why did you buy an ancient AM3 Plus motherboard? Nobody cares about these. I care about these, and this is my channel, and so screw you. We're looking at a UD5. Now, ultimately, it's not getting a full PCB breakdown because I decided, you know what, that's actually a bit much. This board really isn't that special. I'm actually kind of disappointed, but at least I got it cheap. The thing is, I have some ideas. I have a 990FX G1 gaming, which is my favorite motherboard for AM3 Plus benchmarking when it comes to like frequency validation. Like, it's a great board. I love it. It's got a postcode and everything. This doesn't have a postcode, which already is not a good thing. But that board, like, I have some ideas that I like don't want to try on a board I really like. So I bought this because it's like, well, this doesn't have a postcode. It has a PCI slot, so we could just buy, like, I just need to buy like a PCIe postcard and then it would have a postcode. Yeah, this is not as cool a board. And so I figured, hey, well, you know, for some silly experiments, I might as well pick this up. And I've cleaned it because it turned up dusty as hell, as, you know, as the norm for secondhand hardware. So it got a bath in water and dish soap with a very fine, like a very soft toothbrush. And then I rinsed it off with alcohol. Because you don't, like, my water here is rock hard. Like, there are some parts where I've literally just washed them with water and didn't do the alcohol rinse, but its best idea is to actually do the alcohol rinse. But anyway, so this thing, yeah, it cost me 60 quid, and I have some bad ideas for it. And then if those bad ideas work well on this, I'm gonna take those bad ideas and apply them to my other 990FX boards. The other thing is like Gigabyte, like the G1 gaming has me really impressed. Like, that board works so well with various memory, because I have a Asus 970 Aura Pro Gaming, and that board actually has a better VRM than the G1. But that board has weird memory compatibility problems that I don't like dealing with. So I basically wanted another Gigabyte motherboard with a stronger VRM, and I was kind of hoping for, like, well, say a 6-layer PCB, but no, this is a 4, which, I mean, you know, it's a 990FX board. Like, 990FX is just such an awkward platform because you have really high power consumption CPUs that need, you know, expensive high-end power delivery for them. But the CPUs suck, so nobody wants to build expensive 990FX boards. And so the selection of good 990FX motherboards is really bad. And so I picked this up as a kind of like, oh, I wonder if this is any good. Anyway, so that's kind of the intro. Also, I know this is a 4-layer board because we have a little indicator all the way down there. I'm going to try and get that into the camera. Oh, come on. Let's see. Focus? Oh, there you see. So yeah, you see that little... Man, my finger's getting in the way. But there's a little 4 over there, and that tells us it's a 4-layer board. And that works for a lot of Gigabyte motherboards. Like, that works even for the X58 Gigabyte boards I have. So, yeah, I was kind of hoping for a 6-layer, but it's a 4. But that's fine, because I have bad ideas that we can do with a 4-layer board anyway. One of the bad ideas is, like, I want to figure out if there's a way to, like, hotwire the dual BIOS system to manually control it. Because the thing is, like, on the G1, the biggest problem with it is a dual, like, the dual BIOS is just so annoying. Because it doesn't have a switch to manually put the board in single BIOS mode, so it's like, yeah, I want to add that functionality to this board. If I figure out how to do that on this board, then I'm porting that mod to the G1 as well, and then potentially all of my Gigabyte motherboards that don't have single BIOS mode switches on them. In terms of the power delivery here, we're looking at a 8-phase V-core running off of some Intersil controller that's a 4+1, but that then goes into a bunch of ISL 6617 doublers, so we get 8-phase V-core, 2-phase CPU NB. So another funny thing about 990FX is you have that, you know, North bridge in the CPU, and then the North bridge on the motherboard, and then the South bridge down here as well. Yeah, so 8-phase V-core, 2-phase CPU North bridge, 1 phase for North bridge, and And I know there's two inductors over here, but this one's actually like, well, as far as I can tell, this one's input filtering. I've not actually bothered to check. It looks like this runs off of the 5-volt rail. But yeah, like the power plane layout there doesn't otherwise make sense. So this is single phase. Like this is probably, well, actually no, you might have, this could be a single phase with two inductors, but that makes far less sense than this being an input filter because, yeah, that just like you wouldn't lay out your inductors like this. That does, it's weird. Also the caps are just weird for that kind of layout. So anyway, but the thing is, the controller for that is some Richtech, like that's the generic like Gigabyte RT. What is it? RT8120, isn't it? Yeah, that's an RT8120. So Gigabyte, like the RT8120 is a single phase voltage controller from Richtech that Gigabyte uses absolutely everywhere. So yeah, single phase Northbridge. For the V-Core power and V-Core and CPU Northbridge, we're looking at 35 amp DR-MOS power stages from Vishay Semiconductor. Those are SIC 679 power stages. They're rated for only 35 amps max output current. But what's kind of funny with the 35 amp parts is, unlike with, say, if you have like a 70 amp smart power stage, realistically you're never going to run 70 amps through it because it's going to produce an insane amount of heat, right? Because even if you're hitting, because most power stages, their max current output rating is all the way out at like 85% efficiency, which is really low. That's like, that's not great efficiency, right? Like 15%, like basically the amount of power going into the power stage is 15% higher than the amount of power coming out. So you have a lot of heat, right? If you had, like one way to think about this is if you had a power stage. Okay, actually, no, that doesn't work, does it? No, yeah, if you had a 85 amp power stage, and it was 85% efficient, then it would be putting out 85 amps, and it would be pulling in 100, so you'd be producing 15 watts of heat. So, you know, when you look at like some of the 90 amp smart power stages, their efficiency curves end at 60 amps because realistically, you're never going to run 90 amps into a single power stage. That's stupid. Theoretically, you could, but practically, you're never going to do that. So it's like, technically, a 90 amp power stage doesn't do 90 amps, okay? Not in any real world application. But 35 amp parts, because they're so low current, even at the miserable efficiency, you could actually cool these, as these pushing 35 amps produce only about 5 watts of heat, which is terrible. You can get, you know, power stages that produce like, well, significantly less. I want to say, like, you can get power stages that'll do like 3.5 watts of heat at 35 amps output. Okay, now that might be a bit low. 4 watts of heat. So, you know, about, like, these are, like, the efficiency on these is not great. Is the main point. And the thing is, even as terrible as the efficiency is, and that's 35 amps at 1.2 volts output voltage, 300 kilohertz switching frequency. The thing is, 5 watts is not that much heat because the whole VRM combined is going to be only 40 watts of heat output. Like, you can actually cool that even with a heatsink like this if you just jam enough airflow into it. And speaking of the heatsink, I like this style of heatsink. Like, I wish we would see this more on modern motherboards because this is how you get surface area. Right, this is a cheap way to get a lot of surface area. The heat pipe here seems to be more for cooling the actual Northbridge than the VRM because it goes into the top section of the heatsink where, yeah, I like basically because obviously all the heat from the VRM comes from the bottom. So, yeah, that's the heat pipe's not there for the VRM. That's for the Northbridge. But anyway, yeah, so the VRM here, you know, like, you could actually max this out, almost. Like, you could hit almost the rated current output, which you can't really do with, like, higher current parts, because with the higher current parts, even if they have the same efficiency on paper, the amount of heat they're going to be producing is just ridiculous, so not a practical way of running them. Anyway, is that everything I wanted to... No, that's not everything I wanted to talk about. We've got a single-phase memory VRM, also controlled by one of those RT8120 chips. The funky thing about this memory VRM, which is, trying very hard to look like a two-phase, is that this is also used to power the chipset, because... And then there's some other rail that I'm not sure what it is that it's also used for. So, well, the two inductors don't make sense, but the 4 MOSFETs do make sense because this doesn't just power the memory and the memory controller. this also powers the chipset and some other rail that I can't I'd have to check with the board actually running, because off the top of my head, I don't remember all the voltages on this platform. Yeah, so the funny thing is, like, you'd need a pretty beefy memory VRM, because there's a bunch of power that they are, like, Gigabyte is doing that with these MOSFETs down here. So these are just acting like, you'll notice there's no inductor or anything. These are just acting as a linear regulator, because memory regularly runs at like 1.5 volts. And the chipset on this, I think, runs at like 1 volt or 1.1 volts, something like that. So you just need to drop like 50 millivolts. 50 millivolts? No, 500 millivolts. So you need to lose like half a volt, which you can do on a linear regulator. Like, that's not a problem to just do with discrete MOSFETs, using them as a resistor, essentially. It's not efficient. Like, you wouldn't want to do linear regulation from like 12 volts down to 1 volt. But if you're going from 1.5 to 1 volt, then, you know, I don't know how much power the chipset pulls, but I don't know. Let's say it's a 5 watt chipset. So at 5 amps, that's going to be 2.5 watts of heat that you're going to be producing with your MOSFETs down here. So not a very efficient way of doing it. Like, literally, like almost half the power of you basically, like, the chipset essentially ends up pulling 7.5 watts, because you have 5 watts that actually get into the chipset, and then you have the 2.5 that get burnt off on the MOSFETs. But yeah, you know, if you want a really cheap way of regulating your voltage, this is the cheapest way, because you don't need an inductor then. Inductors are kind of expensive. Anyway, other things. The memory topology on this is a daisy chain, 4-layer PCB, which a cool thing with this board, I actually figured out how to identify how many layers a Gigabyte like motherboard has. So that's kind of neat. Obviously, the board also has dual BIOS. Oops. So we've got dual BIOS over there. And this gets me to, like, this is part of the reason why I picked this board up, is I actually want to mess around with figuring out a way to modify Gigabyte motherboards to override the automatic BIOS switching, because yeah, like there's definitely a way to do that, and I need to figure I want to figure that out and implement it to basically force the board to switch back to whichever BIOS chip you want to, use. Other things that I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, the 8-pin power connector on this uses the standard current rating pins. So that's kind of disappointing, considering FX chips pull a lot of power, and that, like, you could overload that. You can definitely overload that, or at least get very close to overloading that. And then if somebody like plugs it in badly, or their PSU is kind of sketchy in terms of how the modular connectors are set up, yeah, this is not great. So that's a bit disappointing. Also, you may have noticed my lovely scribbles over here. So I have plans for this board. Because this is a 4-layer PCB, this should have a lot of power loss getting from the VRM to the CPU. And so I want to mess around with doing power bridges on the board. Obviously, also mess around with cap mods. Basically, the full, Buildzoid GPU experience, but on a motherboard. So yeah, and for that, I've actually had to go ahead and, so this is not the original backplate for this board, but it's I have a bunch of AM3 backplates. Like, literally, I just have a bunch of these. So I dug through my collection of random junk and found one of these, and with a very open socket, because the stock one for this board is actually relatively closed off, right? Like, see? Big hole, small hole. And so I wanted the bigger hole, because if I'm adding caps or whatever, then I'd like to have the bigger hole for that. And the other thing is, like, it'll just give me more space to work in. But the other thing is, I've spaced this out with a bunch of washers, so that when it's attached to the motherboard, I can actually run, like, full-on wires under it. Not very thick wires, but I'm not, like, PCBs are thin, like, really thin. So I'm still in, like, I want it, like, it could work really well. So yeah, that's one thing I want to mess with on this board. And what else was there? Yeah, cap mods, that mods. I'm kind of maybe thinking, I also have the, like, memory highlighted here, because I'm kind of thinking of maybe messing with, like, memory power delivery a little bit. I'm not sure. Like, the thing is like, this board doesn't really have, like, it's not special, it's just a UD5, it's a revision 3.0 UD5, but just a UD5 nonetheless. And so, you know, it's like I have it for experimenting with things that I wouldn't want to do with a board like with my G1 gaming. So anything that I figured out on this board that works well, I'll then adapt to the G1 gaming. And if I don't figure out anything, like the one problem here though is that this is a completely different VRM from what I have on the G1 gaming board. So that's going to be a bit awkward to so anything I do to try and improve the transient response may not behave the same on the other motherboard, which could be a bit annoying. But yeah, other than that, like because the board has a really low layer count, well, actually I don't think the camera will show you the daisy chain very well, but yeah, no, you can't see that. But it is just a regular daisy chain over there. And the funny thing is, with AM3 Plus, my experience in terms of memory overclocking is that Gigabyte actually has better memory support than Asus. At least, like I've never used a Crosshair 5 formula or a Crosshair 5 Formula Z, but the Sabertooth was fine, but I have a 970 Pro Gaming Aura, and that has actually a really nice VRM. But then the actual memory support on that board is terrible. Like, it's really, like, I have some memory kits that are great, and I love using them on my Gigabyte AM3 Plus board, the G1 Gaming. And on the Aura, they're just, like, they face plant horribly. And so I picked this up because it's like, well, you know, this should also have better memory support. So it might end up being, like, this might end up replacing my G1 Gaming. Unless, you know, well, like, I just wanted an alternative to my G1 Gaming that wasn't an Asus or ASRock board, because on AM3 Plus, I really like my Gigabyte boards. And I dailied the 990FX Sabertooth for a very long time, and then I switched to the G1 Gaming, and I was like, oh my god, things are so much better with that board. So, yeah, I have a lot of plans for this, and now let's actually rebuild it. Yeah, let's go for that. So, first up, we're going to need to deal with the heat sinks here, which we're just going to throw some thermal pad on there, and then, you know, well, thermal pad onto the board, then then thermal paste onto the board, and then attach that. I'm going to probably do the socket hardware last. Yeah. So, let's see. Is this convenient? Oh man, that's so close. If I squish it down a bit, it's gonna work. I'm just gonna trim it off as is, right? Because that is almost the right length. So if, like, this thermal pad I think is a little bit too thick, so I'll just squish it down onto the board and, like, stretch it out. Which you're not supposed to do that, but it'll be fine. Nobody ever accused me of doing good work. Actually, more like nobody ever accused me of doing work. Anyway, let's throw that onto the board. Because the main concern, like, the other thing is, like, this heatsink's contact patch is obviously bigger than the actual MOSFETs. So, as long as all of the MOSFETs are properly covered, I'm happy. And they aren't. Not right now, anyway. And having a really hard time getting that up. So. Stretch. Man. Okay, I'm evidently blind, because I am constantly making the same mistake. Okay, wait. Now we're going to hold you down. And there we go, see? Told you. If we just stretch it out a bit, and then press it down so that it actually sticks properly, it'll work. There. So that's the thermal pad done. I really hope, well, it'll be fine. Like, the heat pipe is long enough that there should be enough play in it, because the main concern with this for me is the chipset, well, the Northbridge not having proper contact. Because the Northbridge, we're going to use actual thermal paste. Even though, like, the stock thing is, like, this gummy material. Not, like, I don't know what it is, but it's not a thermal pad, because it's a lot, it's basically gum, as far as I can tell. It's like old gum that you'd find under a desk or something. Which is, yeah. It's going to cover that completely. Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's, can't see any silicon anymore. So that's, or more like it'll squish down properly. So, throw this on there. Oh. Oh. Wait, what? Oh, and now the thermal pad's on the freaking heatsink. Okay, so that did not go as expected. I should align the north bridge first and then worry about aligning the VRM heatsink. That's the trick to doing that. Okay, so get the north bridge first, and... Okay, that's... The hell? Why isn't the... What the... Like... Is the chipset tweaked or something? I mean, the heat pipe? Like, I might have bent it while I was cleaning it or something. Because, okay, that thermal pad is probably way too tall. One of my biggest, like, the thing with bare silicon is if you rock the heat sinks on top of it, you tend to break the dies. Yeah, man, that is really obnoxious. Where's the... Okay. So... I'm holding it by the north, like, I'm holding it by the north bridge heatsink right now. Hopefully, I manage this. Oh man, this is gonna suck. These aren't the same. I don't think, well, actually, all of the mounting hardware for this board is the same, but... Yeah, I'd like it to... At least they gave it long screws. Like, it's especially bad when you have a board where, like, you need to press the... screws, like, you have to actually compress the spring in order to just get the screw to, like, grab in the first place. Because obviously, like, trying to hold the board like this, you can't apply any proper pressure. Okay, there. And now I'm really worried about the thermal pad situation on the VRM. And thermal pad situation looks okay. Yeah, but this thing is not lined up properly. Like, yeah. Like this. See that? It's not lined up. So how on earth am I going to deal with that? Okay, well, got that into alignment. Okay. Got it this time, and let's do the other one. Like, I don't want to, like, it'll lift the heatsink if I tighten it down all the way right now, so don't want to do that. At least these are all spring-loaded, so I'm not too worried about it. Like if you don't have spring-loaded mounting hardware, then there's a bit of a concern that if you've got, like, your thermal pad thickness wrong, then might really bend the board, but since these are spring-loaded, they should have a pretty... Like, there should be a limit on how much pressure they can apply. It's not too bad. The board is bending a bit. And when I put on the CPU plate, that'll level out. That'll be fine. So let's throw that on. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of the small cutout, because it actually, like, covers up a lot of the... Yeah, see? Covers up a lot of the capacitors, which I don't like that. So I might not actually keep the stock backplate on this. Like, once I'm done with the board, it won't even fit, probably. So I won't have a choice at that point. Okay. Go. And, alright, what the hell? Why is this one not? Like, it's getting jammed on something. What the? No, that's straight. Why are you getting jammed? Oh, and now it works. Okay, cool. Man, I prefer the looks of old boards. Yeah, now it's straighter. So the thermal pad was a bit too thick, which I suspected from the start. Normally, thermal pads come in at like 1 millimeter, and this is a 1.5. So I'm just squeezing the board down the center to try crush the thermal pad more. Like, it's a pretty squishy thermal pad. It's just not the softest one on the planet. It's not as hard. Like, I had some thermal pad, I think Arctic thermal pads, which were like really high thermal conductivity, but they were rock hard. So if you didn't have the right thickness, you were screwed. Like, just completely screwed. Let's do the chipset. Oh, this is going to be awkward to get on there. Where are the freaking holes? Okay, I've got that one. Huh? Okay. Yeah, I have to be, like, careful not to rock the heatsink. Because that's the quickest way to kill stuff. I'm so glad that the springs on these screws aren't taller. Anyway, so that one's in. Like, there's a lot of boards where they'll, if they have a spring-loaded chipset, the springs will be super tall. And then it's just so difficult to get everything in place. Because you can't just, like, hold the screw down with your fingers and to you know, get it started. So, go. Gonna tighten up the north bridge again. VRM should be plenty good. And there we go. Man, it is a good looking board. I wish there were, like, it's missing a postcode and some, you know, overclocking features, but it is a good looking board. Like, I really like this. The style, like, because it's just, like, it's nice and simple, you know? It's not trying to be anything. Or, well, I mean, yeah, like, there's still some, like, art, you know, like, it's not like they went for straight up blocks of aluminum with just fins sticking. It's not like server heat sinks, but yeah, it's not what we have now where everything has to look like jet fighter wings, right? Or or a Lamborghini. Lamborghini body panels and jet fighter wings. That's current motherboard design. There we go. Battery's in. And we are going to actually test fire this thing. Like, I don't normally do that, but I do want to try run this board. Just to prove that I didn't screw anything up. Also because there's a lot of hardware where it's like, I get it, I clean it, and then I don't even necessarily turn it on once. Okay, that's not true. Anything I clean, I do turn on at least once. Oh, come on. Yeah, this chip got pulled out with, so, pro tip, if you're uninstalling AMD CPUs, don't pull straight up. And even more importantly, do not try to, like, leverage them out. If you leverage them out, you're going to bend an entire row of pins, which is what I think makes this CPU so, like, I've straightened it out, but, yeah, it doesn't like to go into sockets very cleanly because of that. So, that's a Phenom 2965 Black Edition. And the cool thing about AM3 Plus is it's actually compatible with the new heatsinks because AMD changed the heatsink mounting hole spacing, but where those clips end up is actually still the same. They haven't changed the clip positions, which is kind of neat. So, yeah, let's get this in position. And there's already some thermal paste on there, but since I'm just doing a test boot, I don't actually care about having like good thermal performance here. Oh man, that goes on so... Oh, that's why it went on so easy. Wasn't clipped on the other side. I still don't like the mechanism. Like, in theory, it should be a really easy to use mounting mechanism and like nice to work with, but in practice, it's really awkward. Oh. Why does this one keep on latching? Did I not get it? I swear, like, I've run a AM3 Plus board with one of these heatsinks. So, I'm just doing it wrong. Like, these work. Oh, this broke. Oh, that sucks. Luckily, we have spares. Lots of spares. Because I do want to test run this. Like, luckily I only need these brackets for the stock AMD heatsinks. I don't need them for... Like, I don't actually need them. Yeah, okay. I'm a bit worried that, like, the different bracket wouldn't work properly, but... It actually seems to be the same style of bracket. So this one probably comes from another Gigabyte board. Hopefully this one doesn't snap. Like, the thing is, I don't care about these, because if you're running, like, water cooling or liquid nitrogen, then you don't use this hardware anyway, so... Now we got the other one. So I guess, because this board is so old, like, the plastic is, like, degraded or something? Like, I didn't run the plastic under alcohol, so it's not like I did that. You know? So... Like, the thing is, it just snapped immediately. I didn't even feel like I was pushing on it that hard, so... Yeah, that sucks. I should have just used the different backplates entirely at this point. Standoffs... Well, actually, I'd have to put tape onto the board. I was kind of hoping to keep the board, like, all with its stock hardware, but... This video is going to turn into me snapping every single one of these brackets that I have, which would be absolutely ridiculous. That would be so stupid. Because it's not like unlike with AM4 boards, like, these are often hard to even latch because, and this, here it's latching just fine, so I don't know why it's snapping the freaking thing. It doesn't feel like, yeah. See? Now it's nice and tight, and then... Now I'm worried. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so these were just garbage. Okay. Oh, that's no big deal. They're not necessary for the operation of the motherboard. Let's get some RAM installed and turn this on. Which I feel like, screw it. No, we're turning it on. I decided that this video is just going to be unnecessarily long. I wanted to use a blue kit of memory, but funnily enough, I do not have any blue kits of memory. When we're like, I have, well, the one kit of memory that I have that's blue, one of the sticks is missing a heatsink, so it looks ugly. Which is fine, but yeah, I wanted to do this with, like, things looking fine, like, looking nice. Where's the CPU fan header? Okay, well, we're just not going to use that one then. Or, actually, no, it does reach. That's cool. And we got my trusty GT710 with no mount, like no back bracket, because then you can just have it on a desk like this. Capture card input, up. We're not going to bother with a keyboard and mouse for this. We're just going to start it and, yeah. Big red button. And where's my 24 pin? There's my 24 pin. Oh boy, we're going to have to turn this around. Because the 24 pin's not going to reach. Yeah, I should have kept the extension cable for the 24 pin around. That's, like, I'm not going to go get that. Because I don't edit, and I don't actually care that much, so we're just going to rotate it. And this is light. And the main issue here is actually that capture card cable. Oh boy. Go. Oh man, I don't like how the PCB flexes whenever you're plugging in, like, power cables and stuff. Like, you know, like, it should be fine. The PCBs can take some abuse, but it's like, it is still abuse. So you should try to avoid doing that. Okay, let's get the 8-pin installed. Up, there we go. Get the power supply. Man, there's no LEDs on this. Like, it doesn't even have a standby indicator. I always don't like that. Okay, well, let's see if I'm an idiot. Maybe? What? Okay, that's always scary when the board oh, no, it worked. Yeah, worked. Just the clear CMOS setup. So I don't have a keyboard to plug it in, but it does work. Man, I was worried there. I was like, wait, is this shorting out? Because one of the things, like, if you have a system that's just suddenly power cycling out of nowhere, like where it turns on and then immediately clicks off, that often indicates a short circuit problem. And so I was really worried that the VRM just died or something. Like that I didn't let it dry properly and it died. But no, it's fine. So board works. It just needed to get through its motions for the cleared BIOS. So yeah, that's the UD5 990FX. It's another project motherboard for me. Which, not like I really needed another one, but it's just like, I thought it would be a, like, well, it was 60 quid. Worst case scenario, I'm going to give it a, like, well, I can always do with more boards for dumb ideas. It's my take on it, essentially. Especially since I don't have that much, like I don't have that many DDR3 boards. So this board is very much like a sacrificial board for me. Or maybe it'll turn out, like, maybe I'll test it and find out I really like it, and then it ends up being, like, my new go-to benching motherboard, because, yeah, if I get a PCIe postcard, then, you know, the biggest problem I have with the board, which is not having a postcode, well, that's going to be fixed. And then, like, I think the memory topology on the G1 Gaming is actually the same thing as here, because the G1 Gaming isn't, like, a high-end board. The UD7 is the only Gigabyte 990FX board that is, like, a 6-layer. So yeah, if the G, or at least as far as I'm aware, I don't think the G1 Gaming is a 6. I really doubt it. Like, that board was like 120 quid or something when I bought it, so there's no way that's a 6-layer. Yeah, so, cool board. Man, now I'm so scared about the freaking mounting hardware breaking again. I guess the plastic that just came with it was already just aged and awful, which is why it failed. But, yeah, so that's the UD5. And so, yeah, here's how you don't pull your CPU out of the socket. You twist, and then you pull up. You have to loosen it out. Now, admittedly, there are some thermal paste which are exceptionally like wet and sticky, and yeah, you're going to be twisting those around a lot. Or if you like, the thing is, there's some like a lot of mounting hardware forces you to pull straight up, but at least with LN2 pots, what I do is I actually slide them to the side, because I just pulling CPUs out of boards is not fun. So yeah, this is a shame about the lack of a postcode and the layer count, but cool board. Like, I'm excited to get to play with this eventually. So yeah, I have a lot of fun things that like I still love AM3 Plus. Like AM3 Plus, if you're getting into extreme overclocking, this is, well, we'll see. Maybe this is another good option for getting into extreme overclocking with, because I love the G1 Gaming. It's a great board for that. The 970 Aura is also fine as long as you have modern memory. It doesn't seem to like old memory kits. Or, well, it depends. Like, I've heard from some people that some old memory kits work really well, but, like, my old memory kits hate it. So, yeah. Whereas the Gigabyte boards is, like, I can kind of run whatever, and they're fine. Anyway, I also might mess with, like, cap modding the memory. I noticed, like, on a lot of, like, this is one thing that I've noticed with, like, some boards, you'll have, like, a bunch of capacitance on the VDDR going between the memory and the memory, like, between the memory controller and the memory sticks. And then on some boards, you'll have, like, 2 caps, right? And that's one thing that I'm wondering about, like, wait, like, is this okay, or is this just being cheap because more bulk capacitance isn't necessary or something? So, yeah, I have a lot of, like, hook up, like the thing is, like, I don't really want to, like, the G1 Gaming is also fully plasti dipped, so if I wanted to hook up an oscilloscope to it, I'd have to like take off the plasti dip, and it's just like, I don't want to do that, because that board is like the insulation on that board is really reliable. Like, I could pull it out of the box right now and take it on LN2 and I wouldn't feel too worried about it. Whereas a lot of, like, some of the other boards, it's like the plasti dip, depending, like, because if you apply it badly, or if there's like some residue on the board, it cannot work as well as it should. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly, or which, you know, allows me to buy boards like this, which I think a lot of people might be like, Buildzoid, we don't want you buying boards like this, but they're cool. Like, AM3 Plus is cool, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Well, don't be a Patreon then, right? And then there's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. So yeah, if you'd like to check some of that out, that'd be cool as well. And that's it for the video, so thanks for watching, and goodbye.